Right. Hello then. So hopefully this will be not very long. Uh, what do you call it? Not a very long stream. I'm just gonna basically talk about reflective practice and aim it at like climbers, climbing instructors, climbing coaches. So basically, um, it's just it's often seen as one of the, I guess, sort of not soft skills. Don't like that. It's sort of a personal skill of you know, and the idea is it helps us get much better, much quicker than we would if we didn't reflect. And we're just going to go through this presentation. I used to give this as a sort of MCI mountain AMI, Association of Mountaineering Instructors, Mountain Training Association, CPD. So first of all, what is it? In its most simple, what we're trying to do is look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it, and questioning all of those things in order to help our practice improve. So why we use it, there is this comes from sports psychology, and there's a lot of um, things that sort of super techy, but um, there are lots of reasons. These are just a few, but the first one is all professionals need an opportunity to grow and develop. So this is for the people that are professional. But again, if you're just a climber, applying it to your climbing means that you have the opportunity to grow and develop. Um, hopefully as professionals or just climbers, we want to improve. We should have the ability to learn. And, I'm a firm believer that hopefully we sign up for lifelong learning as instructors and coaches and even climbers are always developing. It helps us take control of that growth and development. And actually, people do want and need information about their own performance. And this comes from reflective practice for sports psychologists. Um, and there's a model that I use later on. So when do we reflect? The thing is most people reflect after something bad happens. Um, if there's a specific problem or issue, they might do that after the session. They might do it during the session, or if they need an answer to the question. And so there is, that's often when people do reflect. Um, and if we get some new information, so, there are a few times in sort of climbing where people do tests on equipment and we find out that maybe what we're doing wasn't as great as what we should be doing. So when should we reflect is ideally we should do it routinely after, should we do it after every session, every new session, after learning something new, or, you can insert anything here. Basically, the more often you reflect, the more you have the opportunity to question your practice, whether that be climbing, coaching, instructing, and develop new things or a new way. So I often use this little model here that looks at how my practice is. But one thing missing off this is basically I'm confined by often when I go outside, I look at the weather. I then look at my student and their aim, and I think to myself, where's good to go? And as a result of all of these, I then will set tasks to reach that aim, given that certain variables that are beyond my control. But the other one is, and I do touch on this later, is me as how I react to situations is going to be different to how you react, and how you react is going to be different to somebody else's. And I think this is an important part of the reflection process is, we're all different, and actually it's good to question. So there are things that affect our teaching practice, or some, even your climbing is, what are you expected to do? Um, what do I want my students to take away from a day? So these are kind of more in-depth things and give you sort of some added background to where you can go with a kind of a routine reflection. You don't have to do all of these all of the time. Prejudices, why do I not teach a bowline most of the time? Why I would let somebody tie in with a bowline, but I tend to not teach it because um, it's much easier for me to teach a figure of eight well and then not worry about it. Why you don't send an 18-year-old on a campus board. Experiences, so often we will have the idea that we have a series of like ready-made lesson plans in our head, and we know that 95% of the time it works on 95% of the people. Sometimes when we're working in that 5% or less, you could say it works on 99% of people 99% of the time, but there's always going to be the one person where that doesn't work, and we have to look into it. The aesthetic knowledge, again, this is on you as the instructor, is how do you react to the learner and the situation, and how that affects how we deal with students and the situation. Ethical knowledge, after this, is we don't use a campus board with young people because it can permanently deform their finger joints. And then personal knowledge is you understand who you are and why you react the way you do. And it arguably goes beyond it. And I've got another talk that I'll do another time, which is on about emotional intelligence. But again, a lot of that is to do with empathy and understanding why you might react some way to a situation, and being able to accept that that's part of you and you may not be able to control that, but actually at times as a instructor we do have to be able to control that regardless. And then the empirical knowledge, what science is there that underlies what we're teaching, and often this is the weakest link in climbing. I don't think that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but there's not much hard thing. So we can gain from reflection knowledge, be that technical, practical, or critical. Technical knowledge is thinking about coaching in a more technical role, your personal competencies. That I would not be 100% comfortable designing a 12-week training program, because that's not what I do. I tend to focus on technique, tactics, and the psychology. I could give you some tips to design a program, but that's not my forte. I would send you off to Lattice if you want a training program. And that's part of my reflection over the years, is that I know that's a weakness in me, but it's not something that I offer. So do we meet the standards to carry out the role? At the moment I'm not working because my back is a little bit painful, so I don't want to work, because not that I don't want to work, is I can't see myself being able to necessarily. I'm worried that if my back goes halfway through a day, or I can only work one day in a row, then that you lose all sorts of like continuity with people. And so so for me at the moment, I've still got a qualification. I could still do the job that I want to do, but I'm choosing not to, because I feel that I'm not at the standard that I was. The mechanical aspects of my coaching, the sort of the science behind the teaching. Do you have a background in climbing movement? Enough to coach complex movement, or was the goal setting stuff that I did in my last one, the goal setting, was that based on good literature, SMART goals and stuff like that? So practical knowledge is explored at how you perceive the situation personally, and how you react, and what preconceptions or prejudices you might bring, but more importantly, how you might react emotionally and how that might affect how you interact with the people that you're coaching, and how that affects both you and your clients' feelings. Uh, People often call it soft skills, but again, kind of, it's soft skills make you think that they aren't important, but to me, probably one of the biggest reasons people are failing the MCI, it's got, I think, 30% pass rate first time. Most people get deferred. Is because one of the things they don't really have time to do is go through the people skills, or these what might be described as soft skills, because actually when you develop them is through, before I became an MCI, I spent 10 years teaching thousands of indoor climbing sessions with thousands of different people, and I learned to deal with people and how to interact with people. Um, Essentially, the practical knowledge is about asking yourself why you acted like you did in that situation with that client on that day. And if you remember the diagram of like weather, terrain, task, client, aim, that all of those things will have an effect on you. This is about critical knowledge about exploring your routine, values, and action. Questioning habit. I did this route, or I teach this like this because that's how I've done it. I've just come back from Antarctica, and one of the most said things down there seems to be, well, we've always done it that way. Where then, that was in the field department, but then I chatted to the head of the air unit, and he's like, well, I want to change stuff every year, because if I'm not, I'm going backwards. And so, even in an organization, you might have different approaches to that. And so this, again, it can be harder because it's not so much, it can be a reflection of you might have routines that you need to sort of challenge, but often it's organizational structures that we're talking about here. And again, these can be very hard to address, because if you're not in charge, then you don't have any, there's no fight for you. So this is I wouldn't advise this 6-stage reflection for everybody. This would be something that if you have a major incident, or if you happen to be one of those 70% of people that have failed your MCI first time, maybe doing this will help you understand why. And when you understand why, you can work out how to get better. Without understanding why you failed or why something happened, you can't then work on a solution. So what we would say is get you to describe what happened, kind of verbatim of like, we did this, and make it quite dull. Don't put any emotion in it. We just want the facts of what went on. Then you can add your thoughts and feelings. What were you thinking going into it? What were you thinking and feeling during the session? Did you, this is the thing, you it could have been anything going on in your life that has given you, you just in a bad mood that day, and you've brought that in. And, is there if you recognize that, the next time you could maybe realize that, okay, I can change that, because this is not to do, you could be, what's at home doesn't have to come to work. And sometimes, it will just help you understand whether there was maybe an emotional aspect to this. And then you can evaluate, what was good and what was not so good. If you have been one of these 70% that failed, what was the feedback? Did the person write it down? It should be on your deferment note why you failed that day. Feel free, if, as tough as it is, honestly, ask the assessor to go over it again, or the course director, write specific things down. The more information you've got, the more you can be, if you can make sense of the session, maybe it was close, maybe it was miles off, what, um, and then, what you did wrong and how you could do it, and then conclude what else you could have done in this session, so what were the options that you maybe considered and then didn't, and then decided to not do. And then the final one is action. If you did the similar session again, what are you going to do differently to stop the same problems happening? And it's a long process, and that's why, to me, it's way beyond the scope of most people when they're kind of going through schemes or instructors. And so what we want to do instead is come up with easy ways. This was Gibbs. And so what if we ask ourselves what questions we can use to help us reflect, and how we can use them on our clients, or if you're just a climber. So if you ask yourself after a personal climb, was it hard? What did I find hard? Why did I find that bit hard? Was it a technique thing? Was it a physical thing? And stuff like that. That's how we could do it as a personal, just a climber. For somebody working towards the MCI, the personal climbing days, you should be reflecting on, how would that route be for a client? What are the belays like? What could I teach on the belays? How hard is it? Is it a good beginner's route? Is it good for, is it good for teaching slab work? Is it good for teaching how to climb cracks? Is it pumpy? Is it, what you're looking for is you're trying to increase your knowledge of different routes and how you can apply them in your practice. And so even after just going and doing a personal climb or a personal scramble, there are lots of questions you can answer. And one of the things that the Mountain Training did a few years ago, I think it was the last ML review, I think they added in that in the logbook, they're not just looking for a quality mountain day or a route, they're looking to see what you learned from that route. And so if you can put one or two sentences or even a whole paragraph in of what you learned from that personal climbing, that personal walking day, that personal scrambling day, when the assessor looks through your logbook, and they'll look through it, they'll be like, oh, this person's actually learning stuff and is moving forward. And you have to present a logbook anyway, so why not make it helpful for you? Because actually, in those first years, you might well question, okay, I've got this client, the weather's doing this, what crags can I use? What routes on those crags will work for this client with that client on that day, on that terrain, that weird little model I went through. Similarly, we can ask questions after a coaching session. So if I was trying to teach somebody something, I might ask myself, do I feel that they actually succeeded in learning it? And if not, what was holding them back? Was it just too complex for them? Did I reach too high? Was it too easy for them? And this is where kind of often we can reflect during. So during the coaching session, if I do something too hard, I want to bring it back. If I do something too easy, I might want to ramp it up a bit so that everybody is developing. And then similarly, we can ask questions during, things like this, continuing professional development, e-learning, and just, taking that time to reflect on what you learn can only help you get better. And And that's really it. So for me, if you could just spend a little bit of time um, thinking about what you do, and if I go back, or is that go? It might not swap over. If you think back to the thing of like what questions you ask, you know, I'd be interested to hear from you. What questions do you ask yourself? And you can put them in the comments below. What questions do you ask yourself, you know, after a personal day where you're either developing your climbing, you're walking, or you're scrambling? You know, what do you questions to ask when you're doing a coaching session? And yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear. I hope that was of help to people. I'm probably going to do one on uh, I found a load of my old talks from when I used to work for this company in South America, Mountain Training School. So I'm going to start doing those. I've got one on emotional intelligence. I've got one on like looking at uh, kind of a skill assessment for people going for the MCI assessment. And I've got one on weather, and I'll try and do one on navigation or something at some point, but I might try and do a one outside for that. Anyway, thanks for listening, and catch you later.